Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming out, or coming in on this nice day. This show has been coming for either 30 years or just 5 minutes, depending on how you look at it. I just mentioned that we dedicate this show to the late John Meredith because the first seeds of the idea were sown at a Jamboree festival 20-something years ago, when Rob Willis and Ollie and lots of people put a bunch of characters together in one room that kind of kicked our head around. There were people we'll mention in the show today, but they were all tradition bearers and they all brought such repertoire in that we thought, and the show was called Sharing the Harvest, and it was for John, who had just passed away at that time, and John being the great father of collecting Australian folk songs, and we thought, well, how do these people who have this diversity of repertoires kind of decide what they keep? And of course you keep what you love, but we'll talk about all kinds of reasons you might keep things. And we thought, well, we're kind of doing that too, and it made us maybe a little more proactive about actively seeking to turn the repertoire over every year and search out for things that we feel like keeping. And of course, every time you learn a new one, a couple drop off the back too. So it's what you keep, but what you let go. And then we found a poem written by Jim Grahame. Jim was Jim Gordon, Henry's best mate, and therefore I guess defined mateship for us all in a lot of ways by spending that time on the track. And Jim wrote a poem called Phonograph Jack. Now, Jack, in this poem, very short poem, was a fella who carried around on top of his swag a phonograph. And he knew where the parties were, so he would turn up at the Bullockys camp as mentioned, but all kinds of places you can imagine. The Good House, down on the riverbank, out on the clay pan. And the obvious question is, what is he carrying? Same thing, same idea. What has he got in his bag? Now, he's a professional, I put that in quotes, but you know what I mean. He's doing this for tucker, for a living. So it's got to work wherever he goes. That repertoire's got to work. Something we related to very much.
And that calico bag that he carries is only so big.
Yes. Now, the only thing mentioned in the song is Home Sweet Home. So we'll reference that, of course, Home Sweet Home. So we'll reference that. But we set the poem, to a tune that we learnt that day in that Sharing the Harvest concert at Jamboree from the great Bill Case. Bill was an amazing button accordion player and a wonderful, wonderful yarn spinner. He told a yarn about mushy peas that day that made Chloe's dad walk out, who a South African fella, walk out of the room saying, "You have a wonderful culture here, mate." And he's got tears in his eyes from the laughter from Bill. Bill was the boss of that band. Am I right, Rob? If you're there? Yeah, he definitely, amongst that mighty talented bunch, Bill was the leader of the band that weekend. And Bill, when he was a little kid, or young, he dreamt a tune, which he called My Dream, we call Bill Case's Dream, and he used the tune to teach himself to play button accordion. By the time we heard him, he was very, very good. So we've adapted Bill's tune for Phonograph Jack.
1, 2, 3, 2, 2.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
You'll be right.
Bill would never have made that mistake.
No, he had an accordion.
That's right. It was made for him.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2. Across the plains and over the hills, with a little box on his back, if there's not a town for miles and miles, you'll find old Phonograph Jack. He carries a few of the old sweet tunes in the folds of a sugar bag, and his battered old piping phonograph is packed on top of his swag. He's known to the men of the unfenced lands, to the women who live out west, where the rivers spill in the big lagoons and the pelican builds her nest. And news goes round by mulga wire to homes that are far and near. We're having a bit of a spread tonight. Old Phonograph Jack is here. for him at the end of a long day's tramp. If there's not a house for a score of miles, for he knows where the bullockie's camped. And the teamsters listen with never a word as the name of the tune he tells. Then his music blends with the curlew's cry and the low ding-dong of the bells. They listen sad-eyed to old home, sweet home. The years in the bush are long, and memories waken and thoughts fly back to the strains of that dear old song. There'll be hammocks swinging from wheel to wheel, and one hanging high at the back, with the net well spread from the foot to the head. It's ready for Phonograph Jack.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Phonograph Jack. Oh, that's right, he's dead. But not in our minds, of course. The one thing you can be sure he wasn't carrying, of course, is Australian folk music. That's not what he had, but that doesn't mean that's not what we're carrying. So we're just taking the idea of Phonograph Jack now, and we'll go on with another tune that Bill Case played, but we learned from Bob McGuinness. Now, if ever there was a candidate for a Phonograph Jack kind of character, it's Bob. Bob's here this weekend. He was before us at the Flute and Fiddle last night, and it was so good to hear him again. So he taught us this tune called Hilarity, and when you're deciding what to keep as musicians who end up outside of the folk world quite often, but even in, it's good to have a tune, in fact, a decent amount of hilarity in the repertoire. It's kind of handy.
It's practical.
It's practical, that's right. And we enjoy the tune very much. It's a fun one from Bill, but we'll think of Bob McGuinness. And we'll go straight from that into a song that we found in a dusty old book. And we've got a lot of dusty old books in our house. I'm sure probably a lot of you do too. And most of the poetry in those dusty old books should stay there, to be honest. But every now and again you hear one, you find one, and you think, grab that one. We wanted to keep that before we'd even set it to a tune. We thought that's a good one. The gold times obviously are important to me understanding my family's history and culture history, the gold rush days. But I've never been quite taken with many of the gold rush songs in the tradition. Forgive me if you're of a different opinion, but we're not great fans of Charles Thatcher. And there are other people who've written songs, but I just don't like them very much. There are some good ones, there are exceptions, but they just haven't stuck. They haven't proved the kind of thing that we fall in love with. And I guess it's a good point to say this is about what we are carrying and keeping, but we're hoping you might have a think about what you're carrying along and keeping as well, because everyone is.
You're all Phonograph Jacks, in one way or another.
Yeah.
You're carrying the things that you've, in your childhood, people sang you songs and you remembered those, whether you liked it or not, I imagine. And now you can choose whether to sing those on to your children. So are you going to pass them on? Will they become something that's passed on? Or are they something that you're going to let go? And tunes are like that. You play tunes for so many different reasons. You might pick one up. For example, Hilarity that we're about to play, we picked up from Bob, because A, it's a great tune, but B, because Bob gave it to us, so we like to remember it, and it's come from Bob. It's Bob's tune now for us. And that's often the case, I think, with tunes. Other tunes everybody plays, and that's fantastic, because when everybody gets together, everybody can play them. So different tunes for different reasons, and we gather them up and we keep them.
This set of words called Diggins, it was from the Great Anon. So often some of the best ones are. It struck us as a song straight away. Seemed to have a shanty-like structure, but also struck me as being, it's felt like it had some direct experience. Now, who could say? But that's the way it felt, firsthand. And we set it to a tune, and then we realised, oh my goodness, we found a home for another one of our favourite tunes that we learned from Alan Musgrove, another Phonograph Jack that you could to conjure. And it was Joe Hilda's tune, and we'd been looking for a home for that tune for a long time. We wanted to keep it, but it couldn't find a home in our repertoire until we set this, and all of a sudden we're playing it everywhere. And it's one of those broken ones. We like the broken ones, you know. Something about the culture I come from that, well, I appreciate mongrel dogs. That's my family's history, is the mongrel dog. Oh, sorry, hybrid vigour. And often you end up with a bit of, you know, dislocation and dispossession and cracks in the culture, cracks in the tunes, but that's where the gold is, where the light gets in, as they say.
Oh, yes. Skin and bone from the diggings, oh, and I wish I'd never gone to the diggings, oh. Believe me, 'tis no fun. I once weighed 15 stone, but they brought me down to 1 at the diggings, oh. I thought a good home could be found at the diggings, oh, but soon I found I got aground at the diggings, oh. The natives came one day, burnt my cottage down like hay, and with my wife they ran away to the diggings, oh. I built a hut with mud at the diggings, oh, but that got washed away by flood at the diggings, oh. I used to dig and cry, it wouldn't do to die, undertake is charged too high at the diggings, oh. Potatoes, half a crown at the diggings, oh. Sprats, 5 shillings a dish. If for a Dutch place you wish, well, $2 will buy that fish at the diggings, oh. A crown a pound for steaks at the diggings, oh. And ditto chops and no great shakes at the diggings, oh. 5 hog a small pig's cheek. If for herring red you seek, well, 1 will keep you dry a week at the diggings, oh. Table beer, 2 bob a quart. at the Diggins O. And get your eyes gouged out for naught at the Diggins O. 5 shillings a 4-pound brick, butter a shilling a lick.
No,
they never give no tick at the Diggins O. And with my nuggets they made free at the Diggins O. I escaped from bodily hurt, though they stole me very shirt. I had to paint myself with dirt at the Diggins O. I felt quite a ruined man at the Diggins O. Thinks I'll get home if I can from the Diggins O. I was always catching cold, I've been both bought and sold, like many more for gold at the Diggins O. But now I am safe returned from the Diggins O, and never more I mean to roam to the Diggins O. It's some people's fortune mends, much on the man depends. I'd sooner be here with my friends than at the Diggins O.
Joe Hilda's tune. So yeah, we like those ones that just fall a bit off kilter, whether it's an extra beat or a strange note, that's for sure. Like I say, it's a little bit like my family. It's an extra beat or a fall off the edge, whatever it is. And one of the reasons we might keep a song is because we just have loved it our whole life, and this is the case with this next song. But it is
found that a lot in the tradition, that often where you can go back and find sheet music for a song, but you can also find it just sung orally, as part of a family's repertoire. Often the bits have got dropped off that they didn't like. Maybe it started off as a hymn, or maybe it was just a bit too preachy at the end, or those bits are inclined to get dropped off.
Knock the flowery edges off the tune.
Keep the other bits.
That sort of
thing. That kind of thing. And this next song we're going to sing has a lot of different versions of it, and we've found them useful for different occasions. We sing one version which mentions the gold rush when we're singing for school kids and when we're doing gigs in the pub and that sort of thing. You'll know this song. And then there's this version.
So this is closer to the version I remember as a kid, and it's one of the few bush songs that when I thought I was running away from bush music to go and play monstrous psychedelic rock and roll in Sydney, you can see how well that worked out. I know I enjoyed myself, and I met Chloe down there, so who would change a thing? But and Chloe was playing monstrous psychedelic rock and roll with me too. But there were some bush songs that never left the repertoire. You'd get a little gig just with an acoustic guitar, or thanks to Billy Bragg, I'd strap the Telecaster on for a solo gig too sometimes, and he showed me you could do that. And this was one song that just never left. Streets of Fools was another one. There were just a couple that hung around. I like this version of it because it reminds me of the version I heard as a kid, and it's also a version that doesn't mention gold, which just makes it an interesting song that possibly dates it as an earlier version. I couldn't say, but we call it Lad from Erin's Isle. And yeah, the free settler thing was a big deal. Most of my family came out before the gold rush. In that gap between the invasion and the gold rush, that's where most of my kind of great, whatever, how many great-grandparents landed here. And some of them, you know, in chains. Quite a few of them in chains. But some not. Some are like this next bloke coming out from Ireland. And I love the kind of, it's a swag-carrying song, and I love the kind of sense of the tingle in the toe and the heel in this song. There's a lot of songs about how hard it was out there on the track. I like the ones that catch a little bit of the joy as well. 2, 3. With my swag on my shoulder, billy can in my hand, I'll tramp the bush of Australia with a true-born Irishman. When first I came to Sydney, the girls and me did smile, saying one unto the other, here's a lad from Erin's Isle. Well, I went down to a public house to spend an hour or two, and the daughter of the landlady, she fell in love with me.
Oh, daughter, dear old daughter, what do you mean to do? To fall in love with an Irishman, a man you hardly knew.
Oh, hold your tongue, dear mother,
I'll do the best I can. I'll tramp the bush of Australia with my true-born Irishman.
with my swag on my shoulder, billy can in my hand, I'll tramp the bush of Australia with my true-born Irishman. So around the lighthouse now I tramp, nor leave it out of sight. My swag goes on my left shoulder, then I take it on me right. It's then I take it off me back, and often upon it I lie. It's the best of all the tucker tracks, and upon it I should die. One more time. Did I say one more? That tune on the end is that often happens with us, is we'll be playing a song and now at the end of the song we'll just start playing a tune that's come from somewhere, and it's, you can see how it's related to the song, but it's not the song tune, something I guess we would put our name on, but it's pretty much in the tradition and just catches a little bit, hopefully, of how we're feeling about the song and what it's doing to us. We don't consider it, well, it's a good point to say actually, what does it mean to keep a tradition? And for us it means singing. That's what it means. It's not keeping it, there's no, we have a lot of books and a lot of recordings and that sort of thing, but it's about being out there and actually singing them, and we don't try and, we're not, well, look, it's obvious, I've got a guitar, I'm not a traditional musician. Right? This is the ladies' parlour instrument, I believe, if you go back to the time of that song. In fact, you'd be lucky if you'd seen one. So, and I've never happy unless we're making new music. We absorb as much of the old unaccompanied singers and the dance tunes and everything, the stories, everything as we can. But when we sit down to play, we never know what's going to come out, and that's kind of how we like it. I really appreciate the people who can preserve a tradition or copy like people like Alan Musgrove and Greg O'Leary and Mark Rummery who've investigated and now shown that there is a very distinct array of Australian fiddle styles, for instance. I'm so pleased, and we learn from listening to them, but we couldn't do it if we tried. So to me, I would relate this to a story Alex Hood told at the Folklore Conference a few years ago. Some of you were there. Alex got expansive. No surprise there. I love to hear Alex talk. And he was talking about the early days of the Bush Music Club. Now, he was talking about exactly the kind of thing we're talking about now, falling in love with and finding and discovering, answering questions about your own culture by finding these things, voices, instruments, tunes that otherwise aren't represented anywhere. It was a complete surprise to them. And it's a revelation because it's doing what every artist wants, which is to have questions answered about things. And so that's why I fell in love with the tradition through John Meredith's Folk Songs of Australia Volume 2, because when I got it, still playing monstrous rock and roll, I opened the book and there were names of people who taught me to play, people I'd remembered, people I thought I was running away from, but it was a sense of discovery or rediscovery. And that's what Alex was talking about this day. He went on, he did get expansive, but it was all about that joy in discovering a tradition. But he finished with one line at the end of a talk that went significantly over time. He said, but what really excited us is we were doing something new. There's no contradiction
they think
there.
that's funny.
Yeah, well, it is funny. It is funny, but there's no contradiction there at all. Most of the... I go sometimes in the great unwashed public, you'll go and see a night and I'll say, come and see a night of original songs, and what you really feel like when you go is they should call it a night of derivatives. But the most creative work I hear at this festival is done by people who know and use and understand the tradition, and it's not a contradiction. That's where my joy in music comes from, where that deep-rooted tradition comes with a sense of creation. So that's how we're approaching it all. Having said all that, there are two people in our central tablelands area of New South Wales, because that's where Merrow went to collect and called it Folk Songs of Australia. He really could have said Folk Songs of Mudgee and Parks. But, that's how it works, and I'm really glad because they were the names I knew from my childhood. But if you had to pick a king and a queen from the traditions in that area, in terms of dance musician, you'd pick Joe Yates, the great fiddle player from the great Yates family. His great-grandfather sank the third gold mine at Hill End, and there were still Yateses around that part of the world playing all kinds of music, and got a mate called Terry Yates, in some of you might know Terry Candles, wonderful poet, but Joe was the king of bush fiddlers, no arguments. His repertoire was extraordinary. And if you had to pick another person, the Queen, you would pick Sally Sloane. We could do almost anything from Sally, at any of the wonderful dance tunes or any from her wonderful repertoire of songs. But what we've chosen is two Joe Yates tunes and a Sally Sloane song. The first tune is a tune we learnt from Mike Martin called Father's Waltz. And it's a special tune in the sense that of that huge repertoire that Joe had. This was the tune that his dad taught him, and it was the one he was asked to play to make sure he was playing properly before he got into the rest of his repertoire. So that was the role this tune had in his repertoire. And we'll go from that into a tune called Sofala Cuckoo, which we learned from Greg O'Leary, but it just feels grounded in that very musical town of Sofala. And then a song from Sally, and we've picked, because we wanted to do one today, we've picked an old country ballad. So in this case, it's one of Sally's a version of Molly Baun. Like a lot of old country ballads, songs that have come out from the old country, Sally's version of Molly Baun gets shot of the supernatural stuff. It's just not there anymore. It happens quite often, not all the time, but quite often in Australian versions of these songs.
It's a cautionary tale. And we had someone say to us the other day,
it made us creep.
Yeah.
Someone come up about this song, which is, I'm not giving the game away here by saying it's a song about someone shooting their girlfriend. Now, someone said, that's pretty bit out of date, that song. Well, they didn't grow up where I grew up. And then who grew up on farms in Australia when I didn't know that people died of gunshot wounds a lot. Climbing through fences, suicide. It was the 80s droughts especially. So no, I think the cautionary tale holds for me. And the only other thing I'd say about it is if we might call it an old country ballad, and Sally learnt this one from her grandmother who had come out from Ireland, But when quizzed on this by a Scottish folklore, I said, well, that's an Irish song, Sally. She said, I sing about Australians. So in her mind, it was just now. And that's kind of speaks to the way we think of them too. We never think of these as archaic. Not once.
Yeah, people carry these old songs forward for a reason. Sometimes that's great story, wonderful story. And the detail and the care taken with telling those stories, with their 57 verses is marvellous, and that's a joy in itself. So some people will carry those songs forward because they love them. And for other people, it's just the one that Grandma sang. So they'll carry that one. But either way, somebody thought enough of this song for it to be passed from hand to hand and polished every time it was passed. Just changed a little. So by the time they get to us, they're these little smooth pebbles.
I'm sure a lot of you will know, but we work from Sally's unaccompanied singing, or what do they call it these days? A cappella. So Father's Waltz, Sofala Cuckoo and Mollypool.
follow the gun. Beware of going a-shooting by the late setting sun. It might happen to anyone, as it happened to me, to shoot your own true love in under a tree. She was going to her uncle's when the shower it came on. She went under a bush, the rain for to shone, with her apron all around her. I took her for a swan, and I leveled my gun, and I shot Molly Baun. I ran to her uncle's in haste and great fear, saying, "Uncle, dear uncle, I shot Molly dear. I shot my own true love. Alas, I've undone, while she was in the shade by the setting of the sun. If I thought she was there, I'd caress her tenderly, and soon I'd get married to my own Molly dear. A curse on you, Toby, who lent me your gun to go out a-shooting by the late setting sun." I rubbed her fair temples and found she was dead, a fountain of tears for my Molly I shed. Up came my aged father, and his locks they were grey. "Stay in your own country and don't run away. Stay in your own country till the trial it comes on, and I'll see you're set free by the laws of the land." All the maids of this country, they will all be glad when they hear the sad news that my Molly is dead. Take them all in their hundreds, set them all in a row. Molly Baun, she'll shine like a mountain of snow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess one of the points that I'm feeling up here at the moment is that I say that we do feel like we're folkies at heart and folky family, but our as professional musicians, as in quotes again, forgive me the use of the word professional, as in we haven't done anything else for food for a long time, 30 years nearly. A very small percentage of our gigs are folk gigs, very small, maybe 5%. And so, but when we come here, I'm looking at all the people who taught us these songs and tunes. They're sitting out there now, some of you. So it's where we learnt a lot about what we do, but then we've gone out and played. And this is more true out there than here, and certainly this is the case with these next couple of footy songs, because we love football songs. Well, you don't. We'll convince you with these two. We learnt these from Rob Willis, and in particular the first one from the Cape Barren folks and the second one from closer to home in Euabalong. Now, one of the things we worked out very, very early in playing what we sort of call traditional music, or I call modern Australian music, is that if you're out there especially, be it the back of a truck in the west of the Barker River, or a cafe in Paddington, or somewhere in a hoity-toity place down here in Canberra with people wearing ties, not me, that sort of thing, playing for Prime Ministers or playing for whoever it is, you've got to make it very clear that you have a certain views about Aboriginal Australia, the first Australia. Always was, always will be. It's never a question in our minds. Goodness. We don't play this music because we're patriots. There's some things I'm proud of, but most of it I had nothing to do with. It was before I was born. And some things I'm quite ashamed of, even though it was before I was born too. Those people, that was my family who were living out there beyond the limits of location. It was probably the first time ever in their lives, those emancipists, those ticket of leave men, those children of convicts, those free settlers who were feeding the colony but too well to actually go and get and bring back. It was probably the first time ever they'd had agency in their own lives. They were running their own show. I can only think that was a place of great joy, if not some hardship, but that's just undeniable. For 30 years or so, that was the first time ever. And but an enormous amount of damage was being done at the same time to the Wiradjuri people. And at the same time, by the time I grew up, speaking in my ignorance of youth, when I played football, so I played football with all kinds of Aboriginal kids as well as the white kids. We didn't really think much about it. And so there was these overlaps within the culture too. So I had to sort myself out and try and make it clear. Now, there are pieces we use to explain ourselves that we haven't written. Dennis Kevins wrote a wonderful piece called "Our White Man, Have You Any Sacred Sites?" And I've lent on that poem a lot in pubs and clubs and all over the place, just so people are have no mistake about how we feel, at least to some level. But the other thing is we play a lot of songs and play a lot of tunes that have come from Aboriginal players because we love them, because they're great tunes, great songs with enormous character. And that's largely the case with these next two. So it's a kind of an example of that. We've got the Cape Barren football song. So that's down on Cape Barren, Tasmania. Now we learned, Rob introduced us to that music, but other people too, Fred Pryback and Alan Musgrove. Wonderful fiddle tunes. You might remember the guys actually here. Certainly the music is spread in all kinds of ways. But the Cape Barren football song is a wonderful song. There's only one problem, is they're playing the wrong code. Point for a miss and all that stuff, you know. I'm joking, really, but not really. But kind of. You can tell a lot about someone by the code of football they follow. It's only jealousy, you realise. I'm a rugby league fan, and I just wish the back 7 pages of the best newspaper here was covered with rugby league the way they do with AFL down there. But the second one is very much a rugby league song. It's from Euabalong, quite close to home, central New South Wales. And I can draw you a little connection here that I find intriguing. The Cape Barren fiddle tradition has a tune that they call the Mutton Birders Jig. Okay, some of you might play it or know it at least. It's a great tune, I think. It's the tune that the Euabalong, largely Aboriginal players, but football team use for their football song. And I haven't really seen the tune many other places, but there it is. There's a kind of a link there. And
so were there people sharing songs there back at some point, or it could have just been one person who moved? You just don't know, do you? But
you don't know.
Striking.
But these are fun things to imagine. You find these little potential connectors. And the other connection I can draw is after 18 months or 2 years of trying to teach myself to play this with nothing but hiding from Dad, so I didn't have to work in the bush, on the farm, just trying to remember tunes and work them out. That was it. I finally got my first sort of lessons on chord shapes, but I didn't learn G. I learned over the top from Artie Smith, who lived just outside of Tottenham and not far from Euabalong, and I learned triangle. And it turns out later that those were the names for those chords that the Cape Barren folks were using too. Now, they're fairly obvious in some ways. If you excuse the language, Artie said F for fucked. Because it's hard to play. If you're a guitar player, you know, F's for fuck's sake. And I don't know if the Cape Barren guys did that or even wanted to share if they did, but so there's the connections. Anyway, so a couple of games of football for you. One the wrong code, one the right code. And we'll get Ronnie Summers, the late Ronnie Summers, one of
You're
our
sneaking
favourite
in.
singers, right into his own football song. He suggested we do. He wasn't in the original we were singing, Ronnie Summers, but we were singing it at Tasmania with him, and he said, I sometimes put myself in there. And so we do now. Ronnie's in the song. And then we'll play a tune that is kind of everywhere, but it's a version that comes from Cape Barren, and it just gives you some idea about how we think the games of football are going between the Aboriginal teams and the Whitefella teams, because it's called The Black Cat Piddled in the White Cat's Eye.
And that's been a lovely learning tune, that Black Cat Piddle in the White Cat's Eye, because it sits there on a few notes. It's a great one to learn because you can slow it down and learn that, and it's only a couple of places to put your fingers. And I'm sure there are many learning tunes out there. Most people who've picked up a fiddle have probably played those first Irish tunes, maybe, Tenpenny Bit, Morrison's, those ones. I bet you those are some of the first tunes that the fiddlers will play. So it's kind of in my mind, it's a learning tune. When Jane Brownlee was here teaching all her fiddle students tunes, it would be the first one she'd pull out.
See, you're talking about tunes. My
and
first
Father's
national...
Waltz.
Sorry?
We just played Father's Waltz from Joe Yates.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful tune, that unusual one. Which doesn't sound like, it's not a tap your foot tune, it's not quite anything, it's its own tune. But it was the practice tune, it was the one that Joe said his dad got them to play when they were trying to play properly. So whatever that meant.
The first time I ever realised the Australian dance tunes really were something is walking into the session bar in our first National Folk Festival, and there was a circle of 30 or 40, some of you might have been in the circle, old bush musicians and people like Chris Sullivan and Mike and some David DeSanti might have been hanging around, I don't know. And I thought, these tunes sound beautiful and they don't sound like anything else. It sounds like nothing like the Irish session. It wasn't so much the New Vogue tunes, it was Shodishas and Mazurkas and Arse Over Enders and all the good stuff. And I thought this is mine and I've never heard this before. They may very well play like that.
All right. Come on, you white mark boys, and show us the game. The boys from Cape Barren will not run away. For kicking and marking and going up to Stan, Hector and Gino and Don Brownie too. They promised to play us on the 20th of June. The weather's been fine, boys, you'd better come soon. Come on, you white mark boys, and show us the game. The boys from Cape Barren will not run away. I don't bring Billy Martin to umpire the game, for we will object, boys, or take him away.
Take him away.
We have our own umpire with eyes sharp and keen.
Bet you do.
Oh, he's only a sailor from out of the Jean. His name is Jack Lawson, a fair and just man. Ah, come on, you white mark boys, and play if you can.
See it if you like. Come on, you white mark boys.
Come on, you white mark boys, and show us the
game. The boys from Cape Barren.
The boys from Cape Barren will not run away. For kicking and marking and going up to Stan, Hector and Gino and Ronnie Summers too.
Here's some mutton burgers. Oh, the time is here to pack your gears, on the bus we go. We're going to play the scooter and we'll do Cachelico. When the whistle is toot to use your boot, it's on for young and old. We'll hear the women yelling, come on the black and gold.
Oh, come on, you black and gold.
Hard to get good help. We're a happy bunch of trappers, we never train or run. We only play our footy just to give the crowd some fun. We never import players, we breed them all year round. And every boy that's born here will play for our hometown. Oh, the time is here to pack your gear, but you must understand, you gotta play the kind of footy that was played by your old man. And when you've played for years like us and you are getting old, be proud to say you played one day and wore the black and gold. Be proud to say you played one day and wore the black and gold. Full time. Hey! Barren guys. Oh, the black cat piddle in the white cat's eye. The white cat said, oh my. The black cat said, you want some more? The white cat said, no, my eye's too sore. One of my favourite Phonograph Jacks was Maysie Tucker, and Maysie, you might remember Maysie here. She got one of those motorised scooters. I think maybe it was her last visit to the National, and she terrorised the place. You had to really be careful. They didn't have high vis in those days, and yeah, I think Maysie is the reason we have high vis now, because that's a joke. But she was a wonderful lady and a wonderful singer who with an enormous repertoire of everything. And when we say keeping a tradition, what makes us keep a song? This would rank as the song we have sung more than any other song. There's no question, because it is a seriously useful song. We sing it, I won't say every day, but close.
I sing this one every night, putting Joanna to bed.
It's a lullaby. So this is really, really when you start earning your keep as a professional musician, trying to get the kids to sleep.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the songs that you learn, well, just briefly, the songs you learn in childhood and that you always remember, the songs you were sung when you were a kid. If you were lucky enough to be sung songs, you'll remember those songs. And when Joanna was little, my mum was sick, and I know I kind of shied away from singing her songs because it would just make me miserable. She died when Joanna was very little. And I would sing this one instead. So I borrowed Maisie's lullaby. And it's been Joanna's one ever since. It's been the one we sing. Although I have sung her the other songs now. I have sung her the ones my mum used to sing.
Just talking to Christine, Maisie's daughter, just this morning, and it was one of her favourites as well. She said to say good day. So we're going to sing The Moon's Full Face for Joanna's bedtime mostly, but Ollie's as well. And when Ollie was a baby, another Phonograph Jack, Bob Rummery, wrote Megan as they were a tune, a mazurka. So there's two for the kids here that this is another reason you keep the songs, and we love them both very much. Not the kids, the tunes. I mean the kids too.
The kids.
But the songs, yeah. They're here, you know. So otherwise I wouldn't get away with that sort of thing. I think they're here anyway. You here, kids? And this is for you guys. So yeah, so The Moon's Full Face from Maysie Tucker, and
we'll have a go at Bob's Mazurka. This was a late entry.
I got a recording of Bob outside the session bar at the end, like a Monday of a Nationals, when Megan was just tiny. Like Megan was, don't know, were they 10 days old or maybe 10, maybe 20 by now then, 2007. And Bob's playing the tune, he's got this mazurka and we're grinning like idiots and new parents' eyes hanging out of our heads, doing a national on no sleep like the old days, but without the alcohol that made it all seem possible. That's what I remember. And David DeSanti walked past and he said, "Oh, good, getting them into the accordion early." And it's a fun recording, you know.
The moon's full face is big and round, a jolly moon is he. He looks very gay as he sails away on the crest of a cloudy sea. The waning moon is thin and old, a weary moon is he. He sits on the rim of the evening sky, just as sleepy as he can be. But the moon the little children love is the baby moon so new. He looks like a wee little slit in the sky with the sunlight shining through.
Apologies, thank you very much. Apologies if Jonah has started snoring up the back of the... but it is a bit of stimulus response there. Yes, geez, every time I start drilling, that bloke rings a bell. It's funny. Sorry. You know, speaking of kids, we came down, we arrived a little bit tired. We stopped at Binalong on the way down and we were hungry, I think. We'd done Creswick and we'd come all the way home. I'd had a couple of gigs on top of Wiley Mount Panorama, Monday, Tuesday. It'd been flying and busy time. And, some bits have fallen off us everywhere. But we left for Canberra so happy. It's been so good. But we didn't arrive in the best... I think we were hungry when we left, and I'm okay hungry, but some people in the car get a little less happy. So I said, we'll go into Binalong. I love Binalong, you know, and so we did. We went into Binalong, and Binalong's not very big, but you know, Binalong's one of those magic spots. So much great traditional music apart from anything else. And anyway, we stopped, and everyone was hungry, a bit shirty, and as the car doors opened, everyone kind of went their own way, just for a little minute, but I lost them. I lost Chloe and the kids in Binalong, which is not easy to do. Now, in retrospect, this might not have been the best of plans, but I thought if I go to the pub...
Starting to look pretty willful, isn't it?
Anyway, it was Wednesday morning, late morning, so there was no one in there, of course, just me and a teenage woman behind the bar, still in her pyjamas, with one of those red check tea towels and a midi glass. And I walked in, hungry and thirsty, and she didn't even look up. If there was a gold, silver and bronze medal for surly service at the Olympics, Australia would clean up. We've got them covered, I tell you. It's our thing, right? It's our thing. I get disappointed if I see a smile because it's just not what I'm used to. You know, she's like this, didn't even look up when I walked in, and eventually I kind of got her attention with a bit sort of like, excuse kind of thing. And she stormed along the bar when she finally had to recognise I was there, and I'm going to have to paraphrase this, but she said something like, And I said, oh, goodness, okay, look, I'm waiting for my family. Can I just have a media brown, please? And look, is that pie down there in the pie room, is that hot? There's only one left. She says, it should be, it's been there 2 weeks. I said, I'll risk it. I said, I was media brown, and I will have the pie. And so she poured this kind of media brown, and she slammed it on the bar cloth. So most of it just went onto the bar cloth. I'm having fun right now, right? I'm having fun. And she went down, she stormed down, she got this thing that might have been a pie once, and she brought it back, and she just slopped it on the bar like this again. So look, I've got a beer and a pie. And all I'm after now is a few kind words. She said, don't eat the pie. Those yarns are something I would hate to lose. They're tricky though, because for those kind of traditional old sting in the tail yarns, for me, all you really steal is the punchline. I don't know about you who tell a yarn. I know there's good yarn spinners here. You only really steal the punchline. Everything else is true. Right? That's the way you do it, or I do it, and or nearly true. But it's hard to set those things up in a festival environment because you get told you're going to be told a yarn, and that doesn't work.
That wrecks it, yeah.
That wrecks the whole plan. They have yarn spinning competitions at the country music festivals, and I've had one here for a long time, which was done as well as you can do them, but they've turned yarns into a different thing in the country scene from my experience with them, more like little theatre pieces, like an amateur dramatic thing. And that's great, it's fun, and I love it, but it's not that. And I know we're talking to Rob about how hard yarns and stories are to collect, to get someone just to tell you a story, not necessarily their story, but a story. So, yeah, when you find a good one, keep it, and I encourage you to lie to people as much as you can. It's, Frank Daniel used to say, only half the lies I tell are the truth. So, right, don't eat the pie, was that? I wish I...
Did you eat it, she said?
Did I eat the pie? Yes. I was tossing a coin there, yes or no. Now, you do become connoisseurs of pies as travelling musicians, you do. That wasn't a good one. But I had fun, like I said. Right here on this stage, many years ago, we heard a song sung by Stewie from the Gay Charmers. Stewie's here this weekend. I haven't said hello yet, but I love that dance band. I love those guys to bits. Their music is amazing. And within seconds of hearing this song, we knew we wanted to keep it. And so Stewie did a great version of that song that night. We sing it all the time. It's a song that Stewie learned from some people called the Baulch brothers. So if you imagine we are out there, let's say at Carrawabity, outside of Forbes on the bank of the Lachlan, and Phonograph Jack's come in and he's been playing his records, and everyone's got a story. What you've got to imagine now is it's night time on the riverbank and three shortish square guys come in stripy shirts with ukuleles and start singing really, really problematic, politically incorrect songs at you in harmony. And they were fantastic. just amazing. Most of the songs you can't sing anymore. I think we might get away with this one. We seem to. Stewie sang it, and I thought, that's for us. The song was written by the Baulch brothers, their dad. Okay, and their dad's name was Arthur Spendlow Baulch. So if you wanted to write a letter to the bloke who wrote this song, which I wish I could do, the closest post office was Mystic Park, so you'd write Arthur Spendlow Baulch, Mystic Park, and they called their property Bugger Castle. Bugger Castle. So, that story alone would make me want to keep this song. And I guess that's speaking back to what Chloe said about all of these pieces for us are attached to people and stories and places. And we have people who buy our CDs, not that we intend this, but we've bought a CD. Oh, what a good idea.
Oh,
we've got them
you
out.
could do that today.
No. They buy CDs and they see the geography in the notes, and they go on car trips and actually bounce from place to place. And they cook a measure, and then they go and they head over to whatever it is. And so there's places and it's people and it's stories. And sometimes at folk festivals, someone will come up and say, "Oh, what you're doing that 14-verse ballad, and then he's telling this long story about Cuckamedra, I don't know about this." It always works in pubs. It's funny. So I've had people come up to me at Focus and say, "Well, you couldn't do that in a pub." Bullshit. What a load of rubbish. It works really, really well. And I think most people who say that haven't tried it, to be honest, because people love stories, man, they do. So Arthur Spendlow Baulch, that'll do me. We'll go out of the tune out of the song into a tune that we learned from another fella from down that way, another Phonograph Jack, someone we miss very badly, and another character from this stage, and others Peter Ellis. So for the late Peter Ellis.
Oh, I know a lot of lazy men, meet them when you may. They've never got a penny, always stony broke, they say. With me, it's just the other way. I'm a man of biz. I've always got a shilling in my pocket. Here it is, but I can't change it. I can't change it. The reason why I'll let you know, it's one I made myself, and so I can't change it. I don't intend to try, but I hope to cheat a blind man in the sweet by and by.
So, see, I knew we'd sing this song all over Australia, all over the world, and I knew that line about cheating a blind man might come back and bite us at some point. It actually happened very quickly. We were in Sydney playing a gig at the Loaded Dog Folk Club, and there was a fella in the front row who had the cane, the glasses, and the dog. And I saw the line coming like an oncoming train, a goods train coming down the tunnel. I thought, okay, I'm trying to get a feel for this bloke's character, and he's a bit non-committal. And Chloe said, "I hope to cheat a blind man." And he leaned into Chloe really close. He said, "You'd have Buckley's." I said, "We'll be right with this one. We'll be okay."
I never was a proud man, as anyone can see. The fashions I don't care about, and clothes don't trouble me. I never was a masher, for I'm satisfied to know I've got but one shirt to me back. I can say that, although I can't change it. I can't change it. I've got but one shirt to me back, and it fits me like a bloomin' sack, and I can't change it. I don't intend to try, 'cause while it's being washed, I lie in bed until it's dry. I'd love to help you, dear, but I've got no shirt to put on.
You said that yesterday.
Oh, I thought that I'd get married like a lot of foolish men. Found the girl and bought the ring. I got married there and then. But when the job was over, well, I was down a peg. Her hair, her eyes, her teeth were false, and she had a wooden leg. But I can't change it. I can't change it. It was a great surprise to me. Half a woman, half a tree. But I can't change it. I don't intend to try. I'll just chop her up for firewood in that sweet by and by.
It does get a little chilly in Milford. You do what you can, right? Sorry, that was a bit too much exertion. It must be Monday at a folk festival. I'm inventing words. That was exertion I was talking about.
When I I got home the other night, the nurse was at the door. She said, you've got another one and that makes you just a score. And such a pretty little girl, I hope you'll wish her joy. Well, I wished her to old Nick, but what I wanted was a boy. But I can't change it, I can't change it. I asked a lot who ought to know. I asked the nurse and she said,
No.
She can't change it, she doesn't intend to try. But she hopes I'll have a dozen in that sweet by and by.
This tune's called God Bless You and Bugger Me. Sometimes they're worth keeping just for the name. One more, Chloe. Bring home one for Mr. Peter Ellis. We miss him. So that's an example of a song that you just, I mean, if you're going to be out there and playing in pubs and clubs and all kinds of crazy places, then the old thing of entertainers making them laugh and making them cry, that song's really useful, very useful, and the stories that are attached to them are really important. I'm going to circle back to Binalong and John Meredith now. This next song is an example. We've tried
John
to
Meredith,
pick things.
you said John Meredith?
Yes.
Okay.
Because this is a song called The Binalong Incident.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And
no,
it's
it is, right.
I happen to know on reliable authority being in the room, that this was John Meredith's favourite story, his favourite Australian story. It deals with a time in 1912-13 where the spring race ball in that beautiful bluestone hall at Binalong, if you've seen it, you'll know the one I mean. It's an outstanding hall. The spring race ball had attracted all comers in 1912, and the local shearers and shearing shed workers, bush workers, had gone a little larrikin on the place and acted up a bit. So the squatters' response the following year was to not invite them in Binalong.
Mistake.
Big mistake, of course. And so this is very much an act of what I think of as campfire sedition, this one. So the shearers and bushworkers took matters into their own hands, and this is the story. Now, how do we know the story? Well, John collected lots of versions of the story, but not the song. Carrie Regan was there in Binalong at that time, and he had some verses that he had written about the incident. It's a true story. You can look it up in the newspapers. Now, mind you, that doesn't prove much, does it? It is true, it happened. The Telegraph. You believe what you read, or is your news limited? Yeah. This old man, he talks shit, his newspapers are full of it. He's a phone-hacking liar backing pox beyond the pale. This old man should be in jail. The shovel at him the other day, marrying someone and filling out the divorce papers on the same day just to be efficient, you know. Sorry. Yeah, anyway, so 1912-13, they didn't invite them. They took matters into their own hands in Binalong. Clary Regan went off and worked with Dengate, John Dengate's dad. John heard this story and loved it as much as John Meredith had. John Meredith shared a little bit about the story of John too. And John finished the song. You'll hear John's voice, if you knew John's work, you'll hear John's voice very clearly in the last couple of verses. And he said it to the Camooweal races. I picked a race tune to form the song, and I'll just make sure I'm in tune, although it doesn't matter too much for this one, to be honest. I love this song very much, but we chose it today to do for you because it is one of those fairly rare songs that Or Jamie Carlin from the old days of Bush Music Club, when we sang it one day, said that song should have stayed hidden. And so, but you see, that's the kind we like, right? The only thing that really unites...
You've all got to draw your line in the sand, really. I mean, where does your interest in story and your recognition of older characters and older times give way to political correctness in the repertoire that you're going to keep and that you're going to pass on? There's lots that I wouldn't go near with a 10-foot pole.
Absolutely.
Horrifically racist stuff in the Australian tradition. So does that mean nobody knows about it and no one believes it's there anymore? Is that a danger?
But the contrary...
But I'm not going to sing them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. But contrary-wise, there are also songs from that time when Australia was one of the most progressive countries in the world, relative to the countries around the world, that become very strong agents of what we like to think of as traditional music as an agent for progressive change. So that's, John used to say, if you finish a gig and people don't know a bit more about your values, about how you feel about the world, you failed. So that's the game we're in. And the only thing that really unites everything we do is that we love them all. And I always say to people, if they find a song or tune they don't like, so just wait 5 minutes, like the weather in Melbourne. Something will come along. So the Binalong incident. The only other thing you need to know is, of course, you might have guessed already, or know if you think about it, that Binalong 1912 in Binalong was the days of night soil. Make of that what you will.
That's a loaded statement.
Yeah. That's closer. If ever you go a-travelling, take a trip away down south. And when you get to Binalong, hop out and shut your mouth. For in that town you'll find there's blokes as fit for anything. But if you treat the boys alright, they'll treat you like a king. Oh well, there's Jonesy from the timber mill, a lad that's full of grit. And Smithy from the butcher shop, he threw a can of shit. And Billy Winks from Carter's store came down to lend a hand. And Willie Riley laughed so loud, he said, I think it's grand. Well, they shook the shit from Rooney's pub the night they held the ball. They hoisted it on shoulders high and marched up to the hall. They all took up their posies then, by window and by door. And at the given signal, boys, oh, they flung it on the floor. Oh, a lady neath the window, all dressed up in fancy clothes, was waltzing with a squatter when a smell assailed her nose. She thought that she had broken wind and blushed a little bit. But when she saw her bustle boys, oh no, she fainted screaming shit. Now one thing you'll know as dance musicians, if you're out there, you'll know that whatever happens in the hall, you don't stop playing. They're slipping and they're sliding around, but the musicians are having the best fun of their life, well, I'm guessing. John Dengate's voice. Have a listen to this verse, especially the first line. The ball it ended early, God, I can't imagine why. The squatters, they were furious, and they raised a hue and cry. They could not get a verdict, though they did invoke the law. Now the courthouse bells are ringing, oh, and the Binalong boys are singing. For the shit flung on the floor. So they did escape prosecution. Well, they were prosecuted, but they escaped. Most of them escaped without charge, because the only eyewitness that could place the boys outside the hall at the time of the actual throwing was a woman who could not explain, when pressed by a legal eagle from Sydney, what she was doing outside the hall without her husband at that time. So most of them were let off, and they got out into the courthouse tower and rang the bell for liberty, and rightly so. Some years later, many years later, and a few years ago, I ended up doing some poetry at a thing at the pub in Binalong, and they had a big do-on, and the hall was full of locals and some people who'd blown in, and they said, "Jason, could you sing a song between mains and dessert?" I said, "Well, I got the song for you." And I went out the back, and I was in the green room, so the room out the back of the hall, just practicing and see if made sure I knew it. I'd only just learned it from John, and there was a local behind me who was also going to sing, and he said, "You won't get out of here alive." This is recent history in Binalong, right? Anyway, I thought I'd risk it, and I've never heard like 500, 600 people in such a loaded state as this. It was just like, what the hell is going on? But they knew the story very well. They knew Carrie. And about 3/4 of the way through, one of the before that, some local wags who were volunteering at the festivals, young women and men, started reenacting the throwing in the hall, which was great. That helped. And then this local cocky squatter on that side of the debate, that side of the line, decided it was funny. And once he laughed, the whole hall went off in this huge pressure valve release of laughter. And I was very, very relieved and lived to tell the tale. But it's why we do what we do, you see.
You see, now American Pie just wouldn't have had that reaction.
No. So we're going to finish with a song that takes us out. Everything in our repertoire would have been a candidate today. We've just tried to go everywhere and give you some idea as to why we do what we do. I hope it's made you, maybe you already think about why you do what you do, but it doesn't matter what game you're in. If you watch Sylvester Stallone movies, well, that's what you carry. That's okay. Everyone's got something different that they love and want to do, but you can't not carry. Right? You can't. It's what you do. So for us, keeping means singing. For you, it may mean singing or something else. That story finishes in a slightly sad way, because I looked up the back of the hall and I saw the War Memorial Board. This was 1913, and I saw names of 3 of the people in the song who didn't come home from the First World War. Again, these are why we do what we. This is why we do what we do. And we'll finish with a thought for those people, and a piece from John Dengate and banjo Paterson, all joined together to give the appearance of a medley.
Then in our game, it seems, people have songs. People have songs that they sing and they're theirs, and you wouldn't dream of singing them, until they're gone. And then those songs are suddenly not being sung, and that's a crime. They have to be sung, and you'll pick up those songs and carry them on. And there's quite a lot of songs in our repertoire like that now. As the years go by, we'll do this one for John Dengate.
John was probably the best, one of the biggest repertoires of traditional work that I ever heard. I mean, he's also, yes, of course, a great songwriter, but he also carried a lot of their culture. And I guess one of the things that's worth speaking about is the value of these things, as Chloe was kind of hinting at. These things were never written anywhere else. When Rob Willis, we first met Rob and Ollie here in '90, our first National Folk Festival, heard Chloe sing, said, "Have I got a song for you?" and sent us a recording of Carrie Milner singing Bonnie Moon unaccompanied, and we heard this song, and Rob said, "Oh, can you sing it at a gig that was coming up?" "Yes, we can, but arrange it, do what you like, make it your own." That sort of license that he gave us, and we were amazed at the quality of this song, but we were equally amazed that we hadn't heard the song, because once we knew a little of Carrie's story, it was very much like mine, a generation later, but very similar. Now, we eventually got past that song and listened to the rest of the C90 tape, and it's just song after song after song that I knew Michael Jackson's Thriller album. Why didn't I know this stuff, And then we said to Rob on the phone, if you know Rob, you'll kind of recognise this behaviour. It's just so wonderful. We said, Rob, oh, this is great stuff, and I think it was like 6 more C90 tapes arrived very quickly of Carrie, all of Carrie singing material.
Archer said a lovely thing. We were at Creswick last weekend. He said a lovely thing. He said, imagine if on the radio every day you were hearing these songs, these tunes, these stories. What kind of country would we be living in then?
It's a lovely thought.
It was a
actually,
wonderful
yeah.
thought. All right, last one. Here we go.
So,
A cautionary tale. It's important to learn from our history.
yeah.
So we choose songs that do that too.
So I vote for peace from John Dengate and Banjo Bass.
In this war we're always moving on. When we make a friend, another friend is gone. Should a woman's kindly face make us welcome for a space, then it's boot and saddle, boys, we're moving on.
Oh, but who's your mate, me Johnny lad? So drunk he could hardly stand, with his eyeballs staring so wildly and his violently shaking hand. Ah, his name is not for the naming. His story I'll tell you true. He's a child of the Great Depression, from the lanes of Woolloomooloo. He was reared on bread and dripping, and on dollops of dull plum jam. Well, he dodged the police and his father's boot and his fare on the city tram. Well, he mustered with the militia on the wharves at Woolloomooloo. He fought disease and the Japanese in the summer of '42. Ah, never you mind his shaking hand or his strangely twisted mouth. He was cut off at Templeton's Crossing when the Japs came swarming south. He wept and he prayed in the jungle, and God to his prayers was deaf. It was Choco, retreat on your bleeding feet. And where was the AIF? You'll find him now in Bell's Hotel, round by the Domain. You'll find him under a Moreton Bay, sleeping it off in the rain. You'll find him wandering William Street without any work to do. He's a child of the Great Depression, from the lanes of Woolloomooloo. He's a hollow, dirty derelict, abandoned by the fates. His soul's at Templeton's Crossing, with his dead militia mates. White Lady is his mistress. They fornicate and woo, spawning blind oblivion in the lanes of Woolloomooloo.
In the hospitals they're moving on. They're here today, tomorrow they are gone. When the bravest and the best of the boys you know go west, then you're choking down your tears and moving on.
Thanks everybody, thank you. Thank you.
Jason and Chloe Roweth.